Died for 12 minutes during my sister's birthday surgery. Now we share survival with drummer pigs, cupcakes, and stubborn hearts. I was pronounced clinically dead for 12 minutes on my sister's birthday last year. I'm 24, and my sister was turning 22 that day. A week before her birthday, I went in for surgery to remove a blood clot in my renal vein, but the surgery was unsuccessful. The doctors told me I would have to go through a full renal vein transposition, removing my damaged vein and replacing it with a pig artery. To prevent future clots or another collapse, they also decided to add a stent. I found myself hospitalized in the special care unit on a heparin drip, barely able to keep anything down due to severe gastroparesis, just waiting for the new surgery date to arrive. When they finally told me the date, my heart sank. It was my sister's birthday. She's my best friend, and the idea of overshadowing her day with my health drama crushed me. I begged to reschedule, but of course, things rarely work out the way we want, and the surgery went ahead as planned. That morning, I called my sister to wish her happy birthday. We both cried. She tried to reassure me, telling me nothing bad could happen to me on her special day. We went over every possible complication, and I signed the consent forms, never really thinking the worst could happen. The odds of something going catastrophically wrong were less than 1%, and yet, there I was. During the surgery, things seemed to be going well, at first. The surgeon managed to remove the solidified clot and stitched in the pig artery. The last step was deploying the stent into my brand new vein. In these procedures, the stent is attached to a balloon and a catheter, and they slowly expand the balloon to open the stent. But as soon as it went in, my vein ruptured at the suture sites. The bleeding was immediate and severe. The surgeon clamped both sides of the vein in a desperate attempt to stop it, but by then, most of my blood was already gone. My heartbeat flatlined. I died right there on the table, no pulse, no heartbeat, for a full 12 minutes. For 12 minutes, surgeons and nurses did CPR on my unconscious body. At the 10-minute mark, my surgeon told the resident that I wasn't going to make it, but this resident, a friend of mine, someone I'd grown close with through my work researching vascular diseases, wasn't ready to quit. Somehow, after 2 more minutes, they pulled me back. But I was barely alive, dependent on machines, floating between nightmares and oblivion. They performed blood transfusions, pumped me full of medication, connected me to dozens of machines. When I was stable enough, they rushed me by helicopter to the nearest trauma hospital. The doctors told my family I had maybe 4 hours left. 4 hours. Words no one ever expects to hear about someone they love. My parents and husband all got to say their goodbyes before I was taken away. My mom had to make the calls to my sisters, including the one whose birthday it was. I can only imagine the trauma of that moment. She had been relaxing with friends at her place when she picked up that phone call, and it left her screaming and physically ill, overcome by pure terror. 6 more hours passed before the trauma team stabilized me, during which time I was immediately put on a ventilator, life support, and several drips, my lungs, heart, kidneys, liver, bladder, and brain all refusing to cooperate. They put me into a medical coma to control the internal bleeding. They discovered a tear in my bowel left over from prior surgery, so that meant another emergency operation once I was stabilized. Still, the prognosis was grim. The doctors told my family not to expect me to make it through the night. Getting my sisters to my bedside wasn't easy. We all lived in different states, but when my sister arrived the next day, seeing her face utterly destroyed me. She told me later I was unrecognizable, my skin cold, swollen, like a corpse. And for all intents and purposes, I was. I remained unconscious for 7 days. On the 5th day, something strange happened. I was mentally aware, trapped inside my own mind, fully lucid and able to hear everyone around me. Family members, nurses calling my name, my husband playing my favorite music, my sister even played comfort movies on her iPad. I could hear everything but couldn't respond, like I was under a thick sheet of ice, pounding to get out. The fear when I finally woke up was overwhelming. Tubes down my throat, my nose, my arms, my feet, restraints strapped my body in place. I was terrified for days. My abdominal staples tore open, exposing muscle and organs. My mother, husband, and sister saw things no one should ever have to witness. They couldn't close me up for 53 days, so for almost 2 months, my insides were exposed, requiring twice daily wet to dry packing until they could put me on a wound vac and finally attempt a surgical closure. In total, I underwent 10 surgeries during that time. I remained on a ventilator for 12 days, failing breathing trial after breathing trial, before I could breathe on my own. The ventilator damaged my vocal cords so badly that I couldn't speak for almost 2 months. During that mute period, my sister was my constant. She grabbed a whiteboard and became my voice, my translator. The first words I shakily wrote to her were, "I love you." All that mattered was that she knew I was still here somewhere, and that I loved her deeply. I spent 14 days in the ICU before finally being moved to the wound care unit. I had to relearn everything: talking, swallowing, eating, sitting up, walking, even lifting my left arm or using stairs was an ordeal. I was on a feeding tube for 62 days, bedridden for 6 weeks, and spent a total of 70 days in the hospital. Through every single day, my sister was there. She sat with me for 14 hours at a time, never leaving, distracting me with movies, brushing and braiding my hair, washing my face, and soothing my pain in every way she could. She slathered aloe on my burning skin whenever I suffered lupus flares caused by the trauma. When I finally got to go home, she moved in with me and became my caretaker. She helped me shower, eat, get dressed, do physical therapy. On the worst PTSD days, when I just wanted it all to end, she sat with me, held me together, and reminded me why I was holding on. She never missed a single follow-up or ER trip. She was my anchor then, and even now, though she's moved home, we talk every day. But the hardest part is that I died on her birthday. The most traumatic day of my life is tangled up in a day I used to love celebrating with her. Now, I don't know how to celebrate her without reliving every detail of that horror. The guilt eats at me. She's my best friend, so young, and I fear casting a shadow over her big day for years to come. We both are in therapy, trying to heal, but now, facing the first anniversary, I still don't know how to balance honoring her and protecting my own mental health. I know that being clinically dead was shocking, but given my 14 medical conditions, 5 of them rare diseases, including vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome which makes my veins unusually fragile, it wasn't exactly a surprise that things went wrong. Sometimes I think about how easy it was for my vein to rupture, and it feels like my whole existence has been held together by threads. But I survived, thanks in large part to my sister. Now, as her birthday approaches again, I'm still trying to figure out how to give her the celebration she deserves while making peace with the shadows that day now carries for both of us. I am in therapy twice a week and have on-call support for those intense, emergent PTSD episodes that come out of nowhere. Right now, I'm on a wait list for a psychologist who's specifically trained for medical trauma, but even general counseling has worked wonders for me. My physical recovery is still an uphill battle. I have about 7 months to go, according to the doctors, but little by little, I'm easing myself back into my hobbies and a somewhat normal daily routine. After reading through some powerful conversations and letting it all sink in, I had a long, tearful phone call with my sister. We really opened up to each other. Our feelings about that day are so deeply aligned, it's like we're sharing a single soul when it comes to the trauma we both experienced. I told her about all the encouragement I'd gotten to reframe that day, to see it not as a day of catastrophe, but as my rebirth day, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. The idea really struck a chord with both of us, a new day that marks my survival against unimaginable odds. Since this is the first year, we know it's going to be the roughest. But we're making a conscious effort to shift our mindset and approach. We talked about celebrating on a different day this year, one that won't feel so heavy or loaded. Still, I'm going to send her flowers and her favorite coffee on her actual birthday. I just don't have to put on a brave face and pretend everything is okay in person this time. We promised each other to keep things flexible as we figure out what works best with each passing year, adjusting our traditions as we continue to heal and grow together. In the end, what matters most to me is that we get to share our lives, with all the pain and beauty that come with survival. And as we spoke, something new blossomed between us, a plan to create a bucket list together, as if grabbing hold of the future with both hands. We ended up splitting the day in a way that felt almost ceremonial. I sent the flowers and the coffee first thing and then turned my phone off and let morning be quiet. Around noon, I walked outside and stood in the brittle winter light and felt the air pinch my lungs in that old, familiar way. I thought I was going to spiral, but instead I put my palm over the place where the graft hums and counted to 10 with my breath. It wasn't bravery, it was muscle memory from therapy. When I turned my phone back on, she'd sent me a photo of the coffee in her hands with the caption, "Still my favorite present," and I cried in this clean, uncluttered way that didn't drown me. The part that felt like magic came later, on the new day we chose for us. We drove out of the city, no balloons or candles or cake, just a thermos and a bag of sliced apples, to a farm sanctuary I'd found by accident one night when I couldn't sleep. They had it rescued so with a torn ear and a reputation for leaning her entire considerable weight onto people she decides to love. We sponsored her in honor of the stranger inside me, and the volunteer handed us a laminated card with her name. Juniper, it read, soft and unexpected. My sister laughed and said, "Of course you'd end up with a botanical pig." Juniper took one look at us and came running like a freight train with eyelashes. Her skin was warm and surprisingly satin smooth, and when she pressed her head into my stomach I felt the most bizarre, perfect alignment, this living creature and the piece of her kin keeping me here, sharing a sunbeam with my sister. My sister fed her apple slices and narrated Juniper's thoughts in an outrageous posh voice until I was wheezing. A retired nurse volunteering there let us use her stethoscope. We listened to Juniper's heartbeat and then to mine, one after the other, like a weird duet. The nurse grinned and said, "Two stubborn drummers." We recorded it on my phone. That sound has become my talisman. I'd been on the wait list forever, but a week before the anniversary I finally got the call and started with a trauma psychologist. She's one of those people who looks like a kindergarten teacher and then quietly rearranges the wiring in your skull. In our second session, she asked me to hold a river stone in each hand while we worked through EMDR. I had sworn I'd never walk back into that operating room again, even in my mind, but she gave me an off-ramp I didn't know existed. I didn't have to be on the table this time. I could stand in the corner with my sister's arm hooked through mine and watch. The moment the monitor went flat, the sound didn't crush me, it receded, like a train passing. When I left her office, I could sit in the car and listen to that little recording of Juniper and me and breathe all the way to the bottom of my lungs. It didn't fix everything. It loosened something. We did one brave thing together that I didn't think I could do. We went back to the hospital, not on the day, but the week after. I had written a letter to the ICU nurses and the trauma team, and we brought it with a box of ridiculous cupcakes with tiny edible stethoscopes on top that my sister insisted on ordering because she is extra. We didn't make it a spectacle, we just asked the unit clerk if she could pass the note along. One of the night nurses happened to be there early, and when she realized who I was, she hugged me in that gentle way nurses do, like she's learned to account for bones and bruises that aren't visible. She remembered my sister's braid, the one she would redo every morning by my bed, and my sister, who is never speechless, had nothing to say for once. It closed a door I'd been scared to leave swinging. I also did something slightly unhinged and very me for my sister's gift. I requested my records and found the first clean strip of sinus rhythm after they brought me back. It's the strangest feeling, seeing your life restart in black lines on paper. I sent it to a jeweler who etched the waveform inside a thin silver bracelet and stamped the time into the clasp. When I gave it to her on our new day, she clipped it on and traced the little peaks with her thumb and said, "I can wear your heartbeat to a bar." Men are not ready. Which is to say, we are still us. The bucket list we talked about didn't get abandoned. We started small and ridiculous. We signed up for a one-evening pottery class and made 2 squat bowls that looked like they survived an earthquake and then high-fived about it like we'd thrown vases for the Met. When I lifted my left arm to center the clay without pain for the first time and didn't have to grit my teeth, I wanted to call every doctor I've ever had and make them watch. After class, we sat in the car, foreheads touching, our hands dusty with clay, and agreed that ugly, useful things are our new favorite category. Nothing exploded on the anniversary. No big cinematic healing moment made everything easy. There was a point around sunset when I was sure I could taste the sterile tang of the ventilator in my throat again, and I had to stand in the shower and count tiles until the heat brought me back into my body. But then my sister FaceTimed me with a candle stuck in a grocery store croissant, sunglasses on indoors, and sang happy birthday to herself in the worst falsetto you've ever heard, and I laughed until my scar hurt, and then I laughed at that too. We're keeping both dates now. Her day stays hers, coffee, flowers, something sparkly if she wants, and ours belongs to that soft place where a pig fell in love with us and a nurse let us borrow her stethoscope and my heart learned to keep time again. I don't know if that's how it will look every year. I just know that this year, the shadow wasn't the only thing in the room. There was color. There was weight. There was breath. And there was my sister, still my anchor, jingling her bracelet and saying, "2 stubborn drummers," like a spell. I did something that felt like walking back into a burning building with a glass of water. I signed us up for a CPR class. It was in the back room of a strip mall gym that used to be a tanning place, vinyl floors, a faint citrus cleaner smell trying hard to cover a ghost of something fried. They hauled out a family of mannequins in varying degrees of human and uncanny, adult, child, baby with eyelashes too long. I almost turned around. My sister squeezed my wrist where the bracelet sits and said, "Lo, you can leave whenever. Or we can break Annie's ribs together." The instructor made a joke about the Bee Gees and my chest tipped like a boat. I swallowed a peppermint the size of a thumbnail and it snapped me back into my body. When it was my turn, I kneel over this torso with a painted-on sternum, line my hands up like the diagrams, and start pressing. The plastic clicks in that hollow way, and I can feel my own pulse go feral in my neck, then steady, then line up with the rhythm. My sister watches my shoulders, counts softly without meaning to, that quiet math she's been doing with me for a year. When I get to 30, she leans in and breathes for the dummy like she's feeding it a secret. The instructor says, "Perfect," and I want to laugh and sob and call my trauma psychologist all at once. We leave with paper cards that say we can do a thing we hope we never do, and my sister tucks hers behind her phone case like a talisman. On the drive home she drums on her thighs and mutters, "Stayin' alive is a terrible song to be good at," and then we both cackle at the windshield for a full mile. 2 weeks later, we borrowed the feeling of that room and turned it into something bigger. We hosted a blood drive at the library down the street with flyers my sister designed at 2 a.m. because she gets evangelical when a printer cooperates. I can't donate, I knew that. But I could rent the room and order pretzels and boss people gently into eating oranges afterward. We named it 2 Stubborn Drummers and my sister snorted like a cartoon villain when the coordinator said, "That is unusual." People came. People I hadn't seen in years, my husband's coworkers, 3 teenage boys in track jackets who pretended not to be scared until the nurse told them they were her favorite veins of the day and they almost melted. I stood near the door and took a breath every time the monitors beeped because there was a moment when that sound was the worst thing in the world and now it meant ordinary machines doing ordinary guard duty. The night nurse from the ICU showed up on her day off and put her name down like it was nothing, and when she was eating a pretzel later, she looked at me over the mustard smear and said, "You're loud today." I realized she meant my laugh. I didn't apologize. The sanctuary emailed us a month after that with a flyer for Stretch with Swine, and my sister yelled absolutely not while I whispered maybe yes. We compromised by volunteering on a Saturday instead. Juniper was sunning herself in a rectangle of light like a marmot queen when we got there, and the second she heard my sister's voice she did that pig speed waddle, hooves a clatter like hailstones. I sat on the ground without thinking and she sat on me without asking. A volunteer handed me a brush the size of an oar. I brushed her like a horse and my graft hummed along under my palm in its small, insistent way. My sister discovered that Juniper will follow a peeled banana like a divining rod and used it to lead her back to her mud hole, narrating in that ridiculous posh voice, "I shall require the faintest mud facial, please." Before we left, the director let us hang a little wooden tag on the fence rail with our names and the date. The nail went in with a good clean sound. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with a voicemail transcription from my trauma psychologist. She had a last-minute cancellation if I could come in, so we rerouted, me smelling like hay and sunscreen. We made a new tunnel in EMDR. Not the ER this time. The ultrasound room. I'd had a follow-up earlier in the week, and the gel took me out at the knees. The tech was kind and quiet. He called my graft patent like it was a compliment you win at the end of a spelling bee, but while he chased the picture I went white around the edges. In therapy, she put the river stones in my hands again and said, "Go where your body went." I closed my eyes and let the wand touch down on my ribs in my mind, and it wasn't a knife, it wasn't a tube, it was a pebble skimming a lake. I could hear the Doppler whoosh the tech had let me listen to, like a shell against your ear, like the ocean pretending to be inside you. We brought that sound forward. We paired it with the heartbeat recording from the sanctuary. The psychologist didn't say anything corny or large, she just nodded when my shoulders dropped. I went home with a brain that felt like someone cracked a window. When my imaging results came through, my vascular surgeon, formal and precise, always a little surprised by my jokes, smiled with his whole face for the first time since I met him and said, "Everything looks beautiful." He meant structurally sound, blood moving like traffic in a well-designed city. I heard, "You are allowed to plan things 6 months out." I cried in the elevator for half a floor and then got it together because the hospital cafeteria has a surprisingly decent curry and my sister was already texting me her order in all caps. We did one small, feral thing on our list that night. We went to a community college's open electronic music lab because a kid my sister knows from the cafe said we could mess with sounds for free. It was a dim room full of keyboards with existential dread and wires like a nest. We fed the pig/human duet into a little box and looped it under a synth line my sister stabbed out with 2 fingers in the earnest focus of a raccoon opening a trash can. Someone started a beat and then 3 more someones layered more beats, and for a second it was like the room itself had arteries. We looked at each other with that expression that says, "Oh, this is what we've been building toward without knowing." My sister titled the file Drummer Pigs 001 and refused to let anyone rename it. I had coffee with the resident who didn't give up on me. We met in the lobby because I still don't like the elevators by the oar, and he stood with his hands in his coat pockets like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to hug me. I hugged him. He blurted, "You were so blue," like he'd been holding his breath for a year, and then apologized, and I said, "I know." He told me about those 2 extra minutes, how he had this stupid song stuck in his head that day, never told me which one, and I showed him the bracelet and the time etched into the clasp and he swallowed hard. I gave him a keychain with a smaller version of the waveform, and he turned it over in his hand like an artifact. When we parted, he said, "I think about you when I wash my hands," and for a heartbeat I didn't get it, and then I realized he meant the ridiculous number of times a day he stands in front of a sink and resets. I said, "Me too." We did something I've been afraid to do since before all of it. We danced in public. Not a club. That would be too much. A beginner salsa lesson in the back of a restaurant with red walls and fairy lights and a floor that probably hasn't seen bleach since 2018. The instructor had forearms like a statue and the softest voice, which is a dangerous combination. My left arm lifted without betrayal. My chest did not become a war zone. My sister and I took turns pretending we were leading and then laughing when we absolutely were not. We were awful. We were tremendous. At one point, the instructor tapped his heart and said, "Listen," and 60 people went quiet in a way I didn't know strangers could do together. I could hear forks, the ice machine, the kitchen printer, the hush of fabric. And underneath, my own drums, not frantic, not marching, just 2 players keeping time. For her actual birthday this year, I mailed her a glass locket with a sprig of juniper tucked inside and a tiny scrap of the ribbon from our blood drive tied to the hinge. It got lost in the postal abyss for 2 weeks and then arrived on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. with a boot print on the envelope and glitter stuck to it from some other package's party. She called me, held it up to her phone camera, and said, "We are aggressively sentimental," and then put it on over her sweatshirt like the queen of stamps and delays. Nothing about this is linear. The other night I woke up at 3:11 convinced my graft had turned to glass. I sat on the bathroom floor and pressed the river stones from my therapist's bowl into my palms until my hands hurt, and then I put my ear to my own chest and listened like a person listening outside a friend's door for the sound of movement. It came, stubborn and present. In the morning my sister texted me a photo from a subway platform of a stranger wearing a t-shirt that said "I contain multitudes" in a font so ugly it looped back around to charming. She wrote, "Us," and I got on with the day. We're adding stupid, precise little joys now because they seem to stick. The ultrasound tech printed a still for me and circled the graph like a teacher grading an A+. The sanctuary sent a video of Juniper overturning a traffic cone with authority. The blood bank emailed the stats from our drive and said we helped enough people to fill a small school bus, which is a hilarious and horrifying unit of measure. My sister met someone at a bodega who tried to flirt by asking about her bracelet, and she texted me play by play with a running tally of his offenses, starting with called it a Fitbit and ending with tried to neg me about my shoelaces. We built a song out of our heart and a pig's heart and a borrowed synth. We learned to press on plastic. I can sit in a waiting room and hear a monitor beep and it doesn't knock me out of my chair. We're still keeping both dates. There are going to be years where the shadow arrives early and takes the good chair. Maybe there will be years it stays on the porch. Right now, there's a bracelet singing when she walks and a locket that smells faintly of gin and pine and a wooden tag on a fence with our names burned in. There's a recording on my phone labeled Drummer Pigs 001 that makes me feel like my ribs are windows. There's the word patent scrawled in a doctor's neat hand, as if he were writing a permission slip. When the fear creeps in, my sister says it again like she's paying for the whole show, 2 stubborn drummers. And then, because it's us, she adds, featuring one very important pig, and I breathe, and I can feel my life keeping time. I said yes to something that felt like letting a stranger rearrange the furniture in my chest. The hospital's patient experience coordinator emailed and asked if I'd speak at a noon conference for residents. Nothing formal, 15 minutes, lived perspective. I wrote back the same minute like I was jumping off a dock. The auditorium had carpet that looked like static and a podium with a built-in microphone that made everyone sound like a ghost. The resident who didn't quit on me stood at the back with his hands in his pockets again, a nervous habit I now know means he is trying not to wring them. My sister sat in the second row with her hair in the old braid like we were wearing armor. I brought the bracelet, and my little recording, and a single line I'd practiced until it was memorized in the back of my teeth. I don't want to be a miracle to you, I want to be a person who got lucky in a room where everyone did their job. When I pressed play on the Pig and Me duet, the auditorium did this odd, lovely thing where all the bodies in it breathed at once, a soft collective sea change. The night nurse took a seat halfway down the aisle and tipped me the smallest salute with her pen. After, people in short white coats came up and said quiet things. The surgeon who had stitched me alive twice stood with his jaw working like he was arguing with himself, then said, "Thank you for letting us carry you," and I went to the bathroom and cried at a hand dryer for exactly 30 seconds and then I was fine. We walked out into sun that felt like a very warm hand on the back of my neck, and my sister said, "That was so punk," which is hilarious because I cried at a Dyson. Juniper had a pedicure. That is not a sentence I thought I would write in my life. The sanctuary asked if we could come on hoof day because our girl is 100% sweetheart and 11% chaos, and more hands are better when the oscillating grinder comes out. You could hear the motor from the parking lot, a mosquito whine overlaid on rural quiet. Juniper saw us and did her waddle that ends in a half hop like her body can't decide what animal it is. I sat on the barn floor and braced her head against my thigh the way the volunteer showed me, my palm pressed to the warm hinge of her jaw. When the grinder touched her hoof she startled and then big sighed like every grandpa in every recliner, and a shower of crescent-shaped shavings fell onto my sneakers. My graft hummed under my hand in counterpoint, calm and stubborn. The noise was the kind that would have snapped my nerves in half last year, but my sister was talking in that ridiculous Duchess voice about how one must always be properly shod for a mud appointment, and it got braided into something else. After, the director handed us a bag of produce that had gone too wobbly for humans and we fed a series of porcine luminaries carrots while they made noises that can only be described as the bassoon section at a soup buffet. On the way out, a new volunteer asked about my bracelet and I said, "It's my reboot," and then felt weirdly proud of the exact present tense. We set up another blood drive. I said we weren't going to make it an annual thing and then I saw my sister at the dining table at 1 a.m., barefoot, surrounded by paper scraps and fonts like she was playing cards with a printer, and I surrendered. This time we added a Stop the Bleed station because the night nurse said she would come teach if we provided pool noodles and Sharpies. The community room smelled like crayons and coffee. I was the person in charge of Costco pretzels again, which is a job that comes with a very specific kind of power. We called it 2 Stubborn Drummers, keep the red stuff where it belongs, and I cannot look you in the eye and tell you I regret that subtitle. The tourniquets made me twitchy until I had one in my own hands, then it was just, okay, this is a belt with rules. The night nurse demonstrated on a limb made of foam and duct tape and kept up a patter so soothing I would let her narrate my taxes. People rolled up their sleeves for the blood bank in a steady river. Halfway through the afternoon a guy in a team hoodie did a dramatic cartoon choke on a pretzel bite and the room froze for that horrible beat before the joke lands or the danger does. My sister was across the table with a napkin stuck to her wrist, and in one clean line she said, "Hi, I'm going to help you now," stepped behind him, and did exactly what the pamphlet said. The bit of pretzel shot onto the plate, did a tiny obscene spin, and the guy started crying and laughing at once, which turns out to be a human specialty. I stood there with a cup of oranges like an idiot and then I started laughing too. The night nurse put a hand on the table and said, "Well, that's on brand," and nobody even pretended not to hear. Later, when the room was quiet and looked like every community room after all the earnestness has gone home, folding chairs, a thin lake of glitter, a bulletin board with one pushpin left, we sat on the floor with our backs to the wall and ate the last 2 pretzels dry. The coordinator brought us the tally and used the word impact in a way that made me picture someone punching through paper. My sister said, "We weaponized bread," and I put my head on her shoulder and felt the bracelet press my cheek like a coin. We made a new song. Drummer Pigs 002 started in my bathroom because I left my phone on the counter recording while the shower warmed up and caught this weird, beautiful rhythm from the pipes, a ping and a shiver that sounded like a polite meteor shower. We took it to the electronic lab and looped it under the Doppler whoosh from my last ultrasound. The kid with the very serious mustache nodded like an owl and said, "Field recordings," and my sister said, "Bathroom noises," with the same solemnity. We layered in a tiny, stolen sample of the resident's stupid song. He admitted it over coffee. It was not the Bee Gees, but it was absolutely something embarrassing from the 90s that made us both howl, and buried it under everything like a private joke we could stand on. We named it Patent Pending because I couldn't resist and because my surgeon's voice saying beautiful in that one room hasn't stopped echoing. I did water for real. Not a bath, that still feels like toppling into a whispering well, but the therapy pool at the Y at exactly 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when all the retirees do laps like slow-moving planets. I wore a bathing suit that is 90% engineering and got into the water one stair at a time while my sister sat on the edge with her sneakers off, feet making small moons in the blue. The lifeguard was reading a paperback with a horse on the cover and looked up every third word like a metronome. The first push against my ribs felt like hands. Not rough, not grasping, steady. I caught the burn of sterile in my mouth, took 3 counted breaths, and then the weirdest thing, the noise of the pool swallowed the past. Sloshes, laughter, the horse book pages turning, the hum of a fluorescent light that probably has not been turned off since 2004. I floated on my back with my ear in the water and listened to my own heart the way you listen for the fridge to kick on in the middle of the night, comfort in the mundane. Afterward, I walked into the locker room shower and it didn't feel like a reenactment. It felt like steam and tile and my sister trying to open the tamper-proof bottle of hair conditioner with her teeth like a raccoon who loves luxury. I planted something. We bought a dwarf juniper from a garden center that participates in a crime syndicate with the wind because every time we tried to read the plant tag it flapped into another zip code. The guy at the register had a band-aid on every finger and called everything dude, including the cactus. We took the little tree home and set it in a wide pot because ground feels too permanent and I wanted the option to carry it with me like a small personal forest. I dug with a hand trowel that had a ladybug painted on the handle and said out loud, "I am not made of glass," and it felt corny and also exactly right. My sister tied the thin blood drive ribbon around one of the lowest branches and tucked the laminated pig sponsorship card under the soil like a secret. The dirt under my nails was clean smelling and complicated. When we watered it, the water ran over the lip and made a circle on the patio like a record. The sanctuary called 2 Sundays later in a flurry because a new rescue, massive, shy, ears like sails, had loaded herself into the wrong pen and would not be persuaded out with diplomacy. She respects authority, the director said, and I said, "Do you think we can fake that?" We drove over in ridiculous urgency and found ourselves part of a pig gentle guiding crew. It was not glamorous. There was mud in a bucket and 3 volunteers wearing the exact same expression as the DMV on the day before a holiday. My sister found the banana again. It is becoming her signature move, and I stood at the gate and made the same low little PSS noise I make at cats because I don't have a better one for pigs yet. The new girl watched us, considered her entire life, and then very slowly, very deliberately, walked in the direction we wanted. When the gate clanked into place, I felt something unclench in my body that had nothing to do with pigs and everything to do with choosing and being chosen. Juniper, jealous, arranged herself like a chaise long against my shins and snorted her approval directly onto my kneecap. We got back in the car with mud in our socks and my sister said, "We are not qualified for any of the life we are living," and then turned the key like she was starting an adventure movie. I saw the resident again, in a hallway that I have been avoiding like it wronged me personally. He told me he hums that ridiculous 90s song when he scrubs now, which is a very stupid and also perfect magic trick. I gave him a tiny potted basil because my trauma psychologist says give your brain new pathways to the old doors, and I like the idea of him adding something green to his windowsill that doesn't beep. He sent us a video the next week, just his gloved hands in a sink, water on steel, the song whistled under his breath, no patience, no blood, only the ritual of becoming clean, which felt the exact opposite of ominous. On my sister's new day this year I took her somewhere that was as much for me as it was for her. There is a planetarium 2 towns over that does a no lecture, just stars hour on Wednesdays, and we sat under the artificial sky and I could feel my sternum loosen like a jar that has been stubborn all afternoon and finally yields. A child 2 rows down said, "Whoa," at exactly the right time. My sister leaned her head onto my shoulder so we were a 2-headed creature looking up. The dome went from dusk to blaze and back, and when it was full dark there were 3 seconds with no sound at all, and then a hum kicked in to keep the machines from overheating, and it might as well have been an EKG track for the room. We were, both of us, just another set of mammals under a ceiling pretending to be forever. There was a scare tucked in the middle of all of this because there always is. A little blood where there shouldn't have been, a rushed call, an afternoon that could have gone wrong. It didn't. My trauma psychologist kept a river stone in each hand in tandem with me because she said hers needed practice too, and we made it through like you do any narrow bridge, eyes on a fixed point, feet deliberate. The follow-up was boring in that holy way boring can be. The text said, "Patent," and I had to stop myself from hugging him and instead I asked if I could hold the wand for a second. He laughed and put my fingers on the plastic like you teach a kid to hold a violin bow. It wasn't a knife. It wasn't even a pebble that time. It was a tool that makes invisible things show up, and I am starting to understand that is the theme. For her actual birthday, a package showed up at her door at 8 a.m. with a return address she did not recognize. It was one of those cardboard mailers that always threatens to take your thumb off. I had written "open with caution" and scissors on it in capital letters, and she ignored me. Inside was a lathe-cut 7-inch with a watercolor pig on the label and Drummer Pigs 002 in my messy hand. The B-side was a blank with a single sentence scratched into it: "You can flip this and still get music." She called me with the needle already down and said, "It crackles," like she had invented fire, and then, softer, "It's ours. I don't have anything tidy to end with. The juniper smells like gin and hope if you brush it on purpose." The sanctuary sent us a photo of Juniper asleep on her side with her mouth open like an old man on a couch. The blood bank asked if we would consider making our drive a yearly thing, and my sister said, "We'll see," which is her version of yes. I carried the pool towel to the laundry and did not lose my breath to the memory of mini anesthetic on the air. The planetarium gift shop sells postcards with constellations that look like someone's first attempt at stitching, and I bought 3 because, of course I did. The bathroom pipes still sing when they feel like it. The resident whistled in a sink. The surgeon smiled with his whole face again. The night nurse texted me a photo of a cartoon heart sticker she found under a chair in the community room and wrote, "Yours?" And I said, "Always." We are keeping both dates still. We might add a third if we keep collecting these little anchor points: a hoof day, a pool hour, a Wednesday under fake stars. When the fear comes to sit in the good chair, I let it and then ask it to hold something for me: a banana, a stone, a roll of tourniquet webbing. My sister flicks her bracelet with her thumb so the waveform sings and says, "Two stubborn drummers," in a voice that has learned how to be a metronome. And then, because she can't help herself and because she isn't wrong, she adds, featuring a whole marching band of pigs and planets, and my heart does what it does, ordinary and miraculous at once, keeping time.